Today, our podcast is called Lessons from an Unexpected Nurse's Aide. I want to welcome our guest, one of the most unique and intriguing colleagues I've had the pleasure to work with, Peter Murphy-Lewis. Peter's the Director of Marketing at Experience Care, where he is on a mission to help long-term care facilities improve patient outcomes and increase their quality of care. He's also the host of the LTC Heroes Podcast. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. I can't wait to pick your brain on a few different things. You know, you kind of have a unique background to be working in long-term care EMRs, doing a podcast focused towards long-term care. And recently, you even became a certified nurse's aide. Tell us a little bit more about your background prior to getting into the long-term care arena.
Well, I appreciate the question, Melissa. It might be a little bit long-winded, but I'll try and keep your audience engaged because it is an odd and diverse background. So I'll try and explain it in simplified terms to make the story make sense. So I grew up in Kansas and went to a boarding school in Missouri. And I went to boarding school with a bunch of international students. So those international students, my best friends, were from Egypt and Spain. So I attribute my boarding high school for the reason that became interested in people that were different than me. And I don't just mean different religion or language, but also of different demographic. And then I'll jump forward to college. I went to college in Boston where I studied sociology and Spanish. And my first job out of college was working with surveys and questionnaires as a sociologist. And then right after that, I transitioned to working as an HIV/AIDS caseworker with the homeless population. And I would say, Melissa, that is where I learned how to connect with people and ask questions of people. We're getting close to the podcast. I know it's a long answer. And then after that, I got a really cool scholarship from Rotary Club to study my master's degree anywhere I wanted in the world. And I went down to South America and studied my master's and PhD in Chile. And from there, I jumped into entrepreneurship where I started a travel company. And then I became a TV host on public television down there. And that's where I attribute my life lesson of learning of how to share other people's story to make sense. Now, I'm going to pause right there because right before I went to Chile, I helped my grandmother who had dementia move into a nursing home. And I was about 22 years old, 23 years old when that happened. And it was right before I moved to South America. And I was the person in the family who had the most amount of time because I was between jobs, going to study. And it was that experience where I really developed a passion for CNAs and for nurses and long-term care. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother those first few weeks, just watching old movies with her, getting her accustomed, making her think that was her home, and decorating her room, helping her put on familiar clothes. And my grandparents, all of them passed away when I was in South America. For some of them, I couldn't go back to their funeral. And so when I got the opportunity to work in long-term care, and I'm sure we can talk about that a little bit longer, I really reconnected with that experience of being in long-term care and helping my grandmother move into that nursing home.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear your story because there's such a person-centered aspect to so many of the things that you've been passionate about. And healthcare, unlike a lot of other industries, yes, it is a business, but it is a business built around the care of individuals and the people that matter so much to us. So it's really interesting to sort of hear your journey. I find most people that end up passionate about long-term care had a personal experience along the journey that is kind of their anchor that draws them to that, and they can relate to it in a really personal way. So very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Tell us a little bit about how all of this background led you to take your career journey to Experience Care. What was the draw for you?
So as I mentioned, I got my feet wet in entrepreneurship. About 15 years ago, I started some travel companies in South America. And when I took a break from entrepreneurship and came back to the US right before COVID, someone in my community of startup companies and entrepreneurship's name is Jason Long, and he's the CEO of Experience Care. And he reached out to me knowing my background and kind of bootstrapped kind of growth hacking, moving ahead with marketing and person-centered marketing. And he reached out to me and said, Peter, we're going to take the oldest and best electronic healthcare records company called Experience Care that dates back to 1969. We're going to make it the leader in the market for its uniqueness, and for its commitment to the industry. And he explained to me, he goes, Peter, I want the marketing to speak for itself through our happy customers and the years in the industry and our innovation in our product. And he said, you're going to be able to do anything you want with this team. And I started off, I was one of the only people in the marketing team because they let me build it. And he said, you're going to build your team to 10 people, which I'm at right now. And you can do whatever you want, but only create amazing value for everyone in the industry, not just for Experience Care's customers, not just for our competitors, for everybody. And that's where I got the idea of doing the podcast. And that's why I wanted to work for Experience Care. And the experience of long-term care, working in long-term care has been amazing. Working for Experience Care has been fun. And just having the freedom that Jason gives me to do amazing things is one of the reasons I'm still here, and I love it.
Yeah, the older I get, the more I appreciate autonomy, and not necessarily independence, because independence to me sort of speaks of, I want to do it my way and I don't care what other people have to say. I appreciate mentorship. I appreciate the owner of my company who I can reach out to at any time with questions, and she brings valuable feedback to me. But I love the fact that I can kind of guide and direct the way the company goes and where our focus is, and help to analyze and grow things. And I'm sure that's something you really appreciate about as well. It's really interesting to hear. That's something I didn't know about Experience Care, that it's one of the oldest EHRs in the industry. So tell me a little bit more about Experience Care and kind of what makes you different from your competitors at this point.
I like to explain Experience Care's kind of differentiators in three simple concepts. I usually talk about its commitment to its industry and its staff. I talk about customer care, and I intentionally use that word care instead of customer support, so customer care. And then thirdly is customization. I'm happy to go into a little bit of those details if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So when I talk about the commitment to the industry, I talk about the way that our team has active listening. So we have a monthly peer group for the industry leaders, and you don't have to be a customer of Experience Care to participate. And you'll learn about trends, you'll learn about workflows, you learn about how to do better surveys, but more about reimbursement. And I think that it's that active listening which makes us such a leader in long-term care. We just had a meeting last week with class research, and they said, we are ranking numbers and what our customers say about us explains why we have been around for so long and why we continue to innovate and why our customers stay with us. And it related to that commitment, our business model is different. Our business model is about happy long-term care relationships, long-term relationships, where some people in our industry are trying to do fast growth, whether it be horizontal or horizontal. Ours is about being here for the long time. Some people have in their software, they call residents patients or tenants. We're not a real estate company. Our residents are not called tenants. So I think it's that commitment to making sure we speak their language and we listen correctly is the first one. The second one is, I referred to the difference between support and care. So customer care, I think, is important. The way that I like to explain it is, I think of support as like the way a table leg keeps up a table. I think care is different. So, Melissa, have you ever called your cable company or your cell phone company or internet company, and you're so angry with them that you're certain the person you're talking to, there's no way they use that company?
Yeah, absolutely. We've all been there, I think.
I think so. I'm not going to say names, but my internet company right now, there's no way the person who I'm talking to is actually using their internet, because we wouldn't be able to have a conversation. Yeah. And that what makes me really, really proud about Experience Care, because our average staff has been with us for longer than 20 years. The majority of people on our support team have clinical experience. So there's nurses who were nurses in the Army and the military, and they know how to use our software, and our software has been around for longer than 50 years. So it's extremely stable and very easy to understand. And that's the second element. The third element I would say is customization. I know that having an out-of-the-box product sounds really nice, but coming from someone who's married to a very, very good cook, if I told my wife that she had to use a NutriBullet as a blender, she'd be really upset. I just don't think an out-of-the-box option works. So I think customization, while it might not be the number one thing that you want your first 3 months when you get the best EHR in the company in the market, when you want your CNA to use your EHR and your CEO to use your EHR, that buy-in requires customization. And I think that those are the three things that make Experience Care stand out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've worked with a lot of EHRs over the years and done some consulting as well, and helped build EHRs and EMRs. And a lot of the things that you're describing are the opposite of what happens as companies grow bigger and grow older. Usually customer support, customer care falls to the wayside. Customization becomes harder and harder to get without expending a great amount of resources, or having sort of an in with somebody, or being such a big enterprise user that it's worth their time to make that customization for you. And I wholeheartedly agree that customization is essential to effective use of EMRs. And, I'm going to tell you something you probably aren't aware of, from our podcast together, that I'm a self-described PDPM nerd. But the other thing I'm also insanely passionate about, and I'm kind of surprised by this, but it's come over the last couple of years, is about EMRs, creating them, administrating them. How do you customize them? And essentially the end goal is, how do you leverage the data in really unique and pragmatic ways? I think, and I'm sure you'd agree, that EMRs are only just beginning to discover the amazing things they can accomplish. And I really want to be a central figure in this transformation I believe they're going to go through in the next 3 to 10 years. So tell me what separates experience care from all the other EMRs or EHRs. What makes experience care better than some of the more well-known EMRs that basically monopolize the market at this point?
I'm going to try to answer that with what our customers are saying. So we did some case studies. The marketing team Experience Care in the last 12 months has written 100 pieces of unique content on our blog and our website. And some of the case studies we've done speak for themselves and what makes us different. And one of them, for example, we just did a case study with an MDS nurse who explained that we have saved her facility more than 5,000 hours per year in documentation. We talked to another MDS nurse who explained, and you can find this on our website, that saved her director of nursing 500 hours of work per year, her director of nursing. So in a time when staffing is an issue and training is an issue, I think that commitment to innovation, and not just innovation in our product, is really the difference. Whenever I'm speaking to the leadership team, Jason Long and the rest of the management team, I always say that the 3 big brands that I compare ourselves to in the industry is, for Caterpillar, I consider that we're the Caterpillar in innovation in long-term care, or for 3M, where for their competency in niche markets. We're only in post-acute, where our competitors are getting into acute, or they're even moving into other softwares. I like to say that we are the most competent in our niche market. And then thirdly, Apple's well known for for the amazing quality of its products. Those 3 are who I look to, and where I like to say that we're striving to be. We have some obvious differentiators that you're going to find on our website that people, when they go through demos, they're going to be like, oh, this is completely different. Like our software, you only pay for what you're using. We have free workflow optimization with our customer success team. We have a 99% uptime. And I would say the most important, going back to that customer care concept, Melissa, is we have 95% of our high priority issues are resolved within 48 hours. And I don't think that anyone else can say that in the market.
Yeah, that's definitely accurate. We work with one huge national EMR, and we have had an issue that should have been fixed in October. We're now recording this in January. We've put in so many tickets. We've talked to them so many times, and it is yet to be fully resolved. So 48 hours is an outstanding timeline. I kind of want to go back to, kind of your first comment there and break that down a little bit more. So you mentioned a couple case studies where nursing leaders had demonstrated an increased savings of time. How is it that your documentation software does that? Whether you walk us through a high level or you take us down to the weeds for 1 or 2 examples to help us understand that a little better.
I would say that there's a couple different things, and it has to do with the way our point of care is designed. So we've had a point of care like everybody in the EMR world for 10 or 20 years, us for a long time, because we've been around since 1969. Well, we just redesigned and relaunched our point of care, and it is amazing, and it saves a lot of time from clicking around. You can move from one aspect to another piece that helps people documentation is our Cardex. I don't know if everyone's familiar with Cardex. When I did my clinicals as a CNA. Some of them call it a cheat sheet or a flow sheet. Our Cardex is color coded and it's designed in the same way that you would think about an Apple phone. Like I bought an iPhone for my mom because it's the easiest thing for her to understand and she can't really mess up the phone. That's the way that I think about our point of care for CNAs. And when our clients have a lot of agency CNAs in their facilities, you need something that people understand by colors and by size and by font, and they need to know where to click and they need to be able to document. So I would say that our case studies, biggest amount of evidence or biggest impact is going to come from our point of care and the way that you can flow in between the different modules.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I see from your website, you believe that integration is key to long-term care's future. I couldn't agree more. And I was fascinated to learn that while some EHRs mention integration, it seems like you insist that it's essential for better outcomes. What is it about integration that makes experience care focus on this for the future?
Well, experience care has always been an extremely robust EHR. And what I want to add to that word robust is we have a financial aspect of our software that some of our competitors don't. And it's been with us for decades. And it's one of the reasons that many customers, even if they decide to start off with us, they might start off with financial. Or even if someone decides that, hey, I want to play around with a competitor or they get acquired or consolidated, they never leave us because of our financial. So I think the integration between clinical and financial is the first thing that I would answer. The second thing that I would say that the future of long-term care is integration. Now, I do a lot of surveying, not just our customers, but also people who are interested in our software and leaders in the industry. With my own podcast, I ask every single person when I get off a podcast, I say, what is your biggest pain point right now with the current ecosystem of EHR? And I'm not asking them about their EHR or even my EHR. And I would say 75% would say integration. And integration is where we are behind in long-term care and post-acute care. And I did my third or fourth podcast on LTC Heroes with the president of Direct Trust, which is the integration leader for long-term care, Scott Stewie. And he says, this is where we have to go. And it's going to be a government mandate probably in the next 2 to 3 years. And it's not in the best business model of some of EHRs to make sure that we're all integrated. But this cannot be a decision about what's the best margins for me. This has to be a decision for our long-term care facilities. And they need to be able to talk to acute. They need to talk to other post-acute facilities that might have a different EHR other than mine. And I think that is just essential for the direction we're going. I always say, well, my wife had Apple products up until about a year ago, and I had Windows or PC. So I had an Android phone and she had an Apple. And Melissa, I know that I just spoke about Apple and my appreciation for them for what they do in innovation, but what they do for their proprietary creation of different plugs and different chargers is not good. It's not good. It makes it expensive for Windows users and Apple users to talk to each other. This cannot be what we're doing. We're not talking about iPhones here. We're talking about people's health. Mm-hmm. And for people's health, we need to worry about how different facilities can talk to each other. And that's why I think experience care puts a lot of its eggs in the integration basket for the future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I was just listening to a podcast today and they were featuring the woman known as the millennial psychologist. And she was talking about, analyzing why does she post things on social media? Is it to get the likes or is it to put good content out there that can help people regardless of how much the engagement was with it one way or the other? And I think the same thing is true in business. I find it over and over again, just as you said, the type of content that you're posting, it's the same way we do it in Gravity, to make everything that we do available to everybody, because we don't want to withhold the information. We are happy to share the knowledge we have in the hopes that leads to, future opportunities to work together. And I think it's the same thing with the EHRs and EMRs. I think they don't realize that maybe there's some sort of small market margin or value that's lost up front, but in the long term, the highest integrated EMRs are the ones that everybody is wanting to work with and looking for. And I think it's unfortunate the government has had to get involved because as we know, usually when the government has to get involved and regulate something because of the requirements that are associated with that and how you get laws made in our country, it will probably result in a less than ideal integration, which could have been much better fostered by all of us just working together. So I think it's a really, really important thing as we look to the future.
Agreed.
So let's jump down another interesting rabbit hole together. Tell me, what in the world convinced you that becoming a nurse's aide at this point in your life was the right decision for you?
You know, I would say that it goes back to probably January of last year. I can remember being in a management call with our CEO, Jason Long, and my peers. And Jason said something along the lines of, Peter, what if you became a certified nurse's aide? And I said, oh my goodness, would you let me take time out of my work week and work month and to do that? He goes, yeah, I would love it. And over about the next 6 months, I realized that becoming a CNA lined up with what I think our differentiators are. Once again, commitment, customer care, and customization. And to kind of tease that out a little bit, I would say, for me to be able to understand our customers, I needed to be one of them. In order to give amazing customer care and explain that care in our training and our online training, I need to be a better listener and be able to use the same software that they were using. And in terms of customization, I'll give you a very, very direct example. When I was doing my clinicals at a facility in Kansas, I used one of our competitors, and the ADLs was clunky. It did not leave any room for any description. I was unable to tell a story. I didn't understand what I was doing. I had to use it as well because we were understaffed. So I was kind of truly working as a CNA, even though I was shadowing someone else. And so when I was being trained on it, I just didn't understand it. So when I went back to our CEO and said, hey, the way that our Cardex is set up and the way that our ADLs is set up, this is perfect, perfect, perfect. Hey, is there the way that we can isolate this feature so a CNA doesn't see these other things that I don't understand yet because I'm not trained? And it's that participation that allows for our design team to customize our product to make sure that it makes sense to a CNA all the way up to a CEO. It was long-winded, but I hope it made sense.
No, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I think that is a really smart approach for your leadership to recognize the value of being able to say, you know, we have nurses aides on our team too. Like, we get it. We've used the EMRs, we understand. So I want to ask you, what is something really unexpected that you've learned as a nurse's aide that you think most people wouldn't understand, but should know about long-term care and senior living?
Well, I'll start with a couple anecdotes, but the first anecdote I'll tell you is I went and got my CNA certification at the age of 41. My wife said, what are you doing? And I said, I don't even know if I remember how to study. I hadn't studied in quite some time. I was a little bit nervous. A couple of my classmates hadn't finished high school, and they were way more confident than I was because they were younger. They remembered how to study in high school, even if they didn't finish. So I was a little bit nervous. So that I would say the first thing that was unexpected is how nervous I would be. I documented all of it, and all of that's going to be on YouTube very soon, but I'm excited that I do it. In terms of kind of the highs and lows, I'll start off with the high. The high was that, as I mentioned, my grandparents passed away when I was living in another continent. So when I started taking care of a number of residents who had dementia or Alzheimer's, I really felt that I was caring for my grandpa when I was taking care of these residents. And I felt like it was finally, I was given the opportunity to pay back for all the things that generation gave to me. That generation, my grandparents' generation, taught me to be humble, to be helpful, to be thankful. They taught me so much about gratitude. Melissa, when I did my clinicals, I cried every single day. The majority of the times that I cried, it was because of happiness. I was happy that I was connecting with that version of my grandfather that taught me so much. On the low side, I don't think any of this is going to be a surprise to your listeners, is how understaffed everybody is right now. There were times where I had to rush to bathe someone, and there was not enough time to put ice in someone's Kool-Aid, or there wasn't enough time to sit and listen to someone's story. During my clinicals, there was a resident. She was younger. I would say she was 50, 55. I'll call her Mrs. K. And on the first day, she was conscious. She came to breakfast and lunch. On my second day of clinicals, she was pretty unaware, almost unconscious. And I said to my CNA who was training me, and I was shadowing him, he was amazing, Robert. I said, there's a chance she's not going to be here on my third day. And he goes, you're right. And one of the other CNAs that I was training with, she said, what can we do for her? And, but the three of us, we took 30 minutes out of our time and we bathed her in her bed as she was almost completely unconscious. We shampooed her hair and we brushed her teeth, and she had a do not resuscitate. She had DNR. And so I knew that, if anything went bad, she wasn't going to be here. And sure enough, the third day I came back and she was gone. And I saw her door closed. Her name was off of that. And that was the moment where, many times I had become emotional in my first couple of days of training. That day I was like, I did something great yesterday with my team, and today she passed. And that low of having that person move on was something I'll never forget about Mrs. K and my day of working in clinicals.
Yeah, it sounds like you are so many of the nurses' aides I've had the pleasure of working with. And I found it myself as a therapist that the passion I had to just engage with the people that I had the opportunity to serve every day is what I treasure the most in my memories as a therapist. When people ask me now, what do I miss about being a therapist and being involved in active care? That's the biggest thing I miss, just the stories. And how many times I find myself talking with my friends or family and they're saying, well, where did you get that recipe from? Or where did you learn about those kind of bees and how to deal with them? I said, oh, a patient told me. I talked to a patient about it and they helped me with that. And just the opportunity to engage with so many wonderful people. One of my favorite things about working in long-term care is that the large majority of residents are elders and they have lived a long life. They have a lot of valuable experience. They have a lot of perspective that, particularly in your 20s and 30s, and I think even now in my 40s, I can benefit from that perspective. You just don't have certain perspective until you've been through certain things and you've lived a long enough life. You just can't come by it any other way. And so I just appreciate the opportunity to learn from them, to listen from them, to gain a perspective that's kind of beyond my own world and my own generation, and even, restricted by my own age. And it sounds like you found the same thing.
Yeah, I did come to terms with that. It's something that I think that I knew that existed beforehand, but I had to relive it for my muscle memory to be reactivated.
Yeah. And it's, I think one of the most wonderful things about those types of jobs is, even as how you described, shampooing this particular resident's hair and giving them dignity and meaning at the very end, care when maybe, I don't know, you didn't mention whether or not their family was around, but perhaps no one was there or not as many people were there as we might think, we might hope for on our last days. And just the ability to bring dignity and joy and treat others with respect. I think it builds so much in us as individuals that fuels us to move forward and continue to pour out in the care that we provide to elders in senior living.
Indeed.
So I just want to take a brief minute, Peter, and ask if you can tell our listeners a little bit more about your podcast, where they can find it, and who you're trying to reach with the LTC Heroes podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And anyone who's listened to you, Melissa, has probably either heard about the podcast or heard about our live stream, because I've had you on twice, and you and I discovered each other through, LinkedIn and internet, and I've listened to your podcast. So being able to talk to your audience I really appreciate that, because you were an amazing guest on mine. So we have two platforms under LTC Heroes. We have the podcast, and then we have a live stream. In both of them, we cover, the most pressing common challenges of our industry: staffing, the infection control, census issues, across the board costs and reimbursements and training, and the difficulty of leadership. So the LTC Heroes, the podcast, has more than 50 episodes, and we interview executives about overcoming uncommon challenges or unparalleled challenges. And we've had a number of trending topics over the last year. One of the top ones was where I interviewed a CEO in Idaho about his Facebook ads, and how he directs that towards potential prospects and residents in California who want to move to the country, to rural areas at a much diminished price. So my podcast with Troy Bell was amazing. Melissa Orth, where we talked about the power grid failure in when she went through that in Texas last year. Dr. Bill Thomas, almost everybody in long-term care knows who Dr. Bill Thomas is. The live stream, is mainly on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And that's a much more human approach. That's where I got to know you, Melissa, as a human being, and know, what's your passion? What do you take from a long-term care facility to your home? What do you take from your home into your job? So I would invite anybody who's listening to this to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Peter Murphy Lewis and you'll find me. Or if you want to find the podcast, I think we're still #1 on Google search. So just put in LTC Heroes and you'll find it on every single one of your apps, Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcast as well.
That's wonderful. Thanks for letting us know about that, Peter. I had a great time with you on the podcast and the live stream that we did. And again, today, this was a blast. It's really great to learn more about and from a dynamic person such as yourself.